Cool. Okay. Well, g'day everyone. Thanks for coming. I was actually a presenter at iOS Conf.SG last year as well, so I'm very happy to be back. I absolutely love it in Singapore, and I'm really happy to be here again. Just like Sam yesterday, I am actually wearing exactly the same thing I wore last iOS Conf. The only thing that's changed is I got a new watch. That's it. And I did this with a conscious decision in mind because last time, after I did the presentation, Isaac came up to me and said, "You look exactly like that guy from Silicon Valley." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "I don't want to see the thing," but okay. And so I thought, I promised him I'd wear it again, and so here we go. So as you hear, I usually go by the name Tim, but there's a bit of confusion thanks to a little bit of a breakdown in communication at another conference. Actually, it's been great. Like at the last conference and at this conference, I've actually people legit come up and go like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, it's not Tom?" And I'm like, "No, it's not Tom." So it's great. So I've been a fan of building iPhone apps since the 3G launch back in 2008. Just before I continue, I'd just like to say this is, when you really think about this, the App Store isn't even 10 years old yet. This is such a new industry still. It's fantastic that all this is so new, and it's such a new kind of experience, and the things it's enabled us to do to improve people's lives and innovate upon technologies. It's just fascinating. I really love being in it. I published my first open source library in 2013, this is a while ago. I'll talk about what it was in a little bit. In 2015, I joined a company called Realm, which is, does anyone here know Realm? A few people? Yeah, Realm, cool. So for the last 2 years, I worked at a company that was 90% open source, and it's been very fascinating to see how open source works in a company of that scale. As opposed to a database company, I also like in my free time working with core graphics and core animation. I love the visual effects and the things you can do with the animation and graphics APIs in iOS. And now we have a new shiny iPad of twice as many frames that unlocks even more nice effects. And my last point is one I like to put in there, just a bit of contention, a bit of fighting words. We can take it outside if you want. I actually still prefer Objective-C, so. Don't get me wrong, I like Swift. Swift is great, but I still think it's a little too new, and there's still a little teething issue. So for the most part, I still like doing my libraries in Objective-C, and I've got a whole slide as to why that is the case coming up. So this talk is about open source. The great thing is that pun only works in certain accents of English. Like it doesn't work in American. So, so just really quickly, quick show of hands, okay? I'll start one really easy. Who here has made an app? Not shipped an app, just made an app. Hopefully it's everyone, or else I'm in the wrong building. That's one half. Excellent. So who has used an open source library in their app, like Alamo Fire, Realm, I guess. Cool. That's still most people. Who here has published their own library? Like you actually. Oh, that's cool. That's about 10 or 20. That's excellent. And who here has contributed to a library? Like they went onto the repos, GitHub, and said something's broken. Cool. We've got contributors too. Excellent. Cool. Okay. So I thought I'd talk about if you are interested in starting to doing your own open source libraries, why it's a good idea, and what sort of benefits you can get out of it, what advantages there are. If you've never done it before and you actually want to know how to get started, like I'll tell you like pretty much everything I didn't do because I had no idea what I was doing. And then once you've actually published a library, how do you actually go about supporting it, updating it, maintaining it, and yeah, basically all the stuff that comes after it's been released. So the first library I ever launched was this one, which was back in the Stone Ages, a long time ago. If you wanted to show a web page in your app and have back and forward functionality, you had to roll your own view controller for that. There was no Apple specified one, so you had to do all the graphics and the navigation bar and all that. So I built this one back in 2013. This one still works from iOS 5 to iOS 11, so it runs on every iPad out there. And the basic goal is if you are not on iOS 9 or above and you can't use SF Safari view control for some reason, you can still use this one. And it's really good because a few big companies like Imager are actually using this in their iOS app. My most popular one, which I released in 2015, was a cropper. So cropping images in core graphics is easy, but making a UI to actually let people crop images on iOS is actually really hard. So there's a really great feature in the Photos app that lets you do it, but there's no open one you could put into your own app. So I thought I'd spend the time, a lot of time of the biggest challenge was CG floats being imprecise. So that was, I was sharing Jesse's pain there right, as I was watching that one. And yeah. That one's got the one that's most popular. And this is the one I released most recently. Basically, I ever need one of my apps to obscure content until it's private content until the user proves it's them. So I actually re-rolled the iOS lock screen from scratch. And then just as I finished it, Apple announced iOS 11 and the whole thing had changed, the design has changed. Now it looks out of date already, just out of the door. So that's great. Cool. So, actually, let me go back. There's a bit more of that. This actually goes a bit longer. And another thing I noticed, which is kind of interesting, you can there's a keypad, there's a number pad UI for the iPhone, but there's not one for the iPad. So in doing this one, I actually had to create a settings view control as well. So I went back and actually re-rolled the number pad as well. Let's see that really quickly. Oh yeah, it's got different styles as well. UI visual effects view is amazing, by the way. They can do so much cool stuff with it. There you go. So there's also open sourced a number pad that actually works on iPad as well. And also it's got alphanumeric. Cool, so why open source? So why do we write open source? Why do we write software? So over the course of this conference, we've noted that quite a few things are hard. So yesterday we had UI is hard, threads are hard, accessibility is hard, and I think we should be doing a better job with that one. And today we've had navigation is hard, numbers are really hard, and yesterday strings are hard as well. But and a lot of stuff is hard, but if you actually get down to it, writing software is hard. I mean, if you pull back, when you think about it, the grand scheme of things, all we're doing here is we're tricking a rock into thinking by zapping it with lightning. I mean, it's, like someone said last night, it's a miracle any of this stuff works. This is my entire existence right here in this thing. But yeah, for the sake of arguments, writing software is a process of solving problems. You basically have an input and you want an output and you have to write the code that generates that output. This is apparently a huge point of contention. There is no right answer, but there are actually apparently incredibly wrong answers as well. And faster is a very relative term. Like it could be faster to write, but it might not be good, or faster might just mean it's faster to execute. But in any case, that's a very subjective line. But the thing is, we're all basically doing the same problem solving for the apps we do. Like we do things like download data from networks, we decode images, we do a lot of things that are problems that are just constantly resolved. So it's when you get to this point, it's a matter of reinventing the wheel, and that kind of sucks because when there's a solution out there, you know it's out there, and you have to write your own. You just know you're kind of like just spinning your own wheels because you're not really doing new innovative stuff. You're just redoing work other people have already done. So being able to access solutions that let us actually do those things without having to rewrite them from scratch is great because it means we can write software faster. If it's a pre-established solution, it's probably a lot better than if you might have had more time spent on it, so you can actually trust that it actually might work better than what you could have done in the same amount of time. And this is, usually either vendor frameworks, either from the system like Apple or from closed sourced, which I'll say is not great for a reason a little bit. And then you've got open source libraries. But basically the crux of this is we can do what we do now because people have done the work before us. And that has enabled us to actually create the software we create now. And it's great that Apple's given us so many sweet frameworks because otherwise rolling all that from scratch would mean making software is a lot more time consuming, a lot more buggy, and just overall it'd be a lot more, probably not as great as it is at the moment. And some chap from ahead of his time said that a very long time ago. So, why is open source great? Exactly. So, for the first thing, it saves reinventing the wheel. And as a result, it also saves time. This is great because you can just go in, use the code. We can be sure it's probably been well tested. If it's an old project, it's probably been battle tested in actual production apps before you actually got to it. Another great thing is if you're internal and you're running on one thing and it's just you, that you might not actually get much collaboration going. But the great thing about open source is anyone can come in and help and say like, that's broken or that can be done better. That means that the software gets better overall over time. Another great thing is it also improves quality. So when I write open source libraries, I know that I'm going to be scrutinized by everyone who sees it. So that motivates me to do a much better job I might otherwise do on like a rushed deadline kind of project. It's also really good because it actually makes the code more valuable because, for example, my web view controller, like if I only kept that closed source, that would only be in one app and probably wouldn't have been worth the time I spent writing it. But because I made it open source and spent a lot of time making sure it was really polished, had a really nice API that would be applicable to any use case, that actually adds value and actually kind of like values my time, the time I spend making it a little bit more as well. Another great thing that I discovered that when I was trying to figure out how to learn how to write macOS apps is it's a great resource for someone who's new to the industry or the language, because you can learn how to do APIs and stuff from the documentation, but actually learning what best patterns are, best practice, and what's established is only really applicable in actual working code. So when you open source your code, you're actually helping new people come in and learn how this stuff works, which is really, really good and a really great way that everyone can get better. This is one specifically from Realm. For the first year, Realm's internal core engine, it's a C++ thing, was completely closed source. And that put a lot of people off because, like Apple has said in their WWDC talks before, if you don't know what you're putting into your app, you actually don't have proper control. So, you know, we've got frameworks that might have like hidden analytics and things like that in it. And because of that, I mean, you can use Apple's APIs because you know they're legit, but anywhere else from a third party, you have no idea if it's a closed source product, what they're putting, what's going into your app. So this is great because you know exactly what's going into your app, and it means that you can actually have complete and utter control on the outcome of the product at the end. And again, like I said, once you start putting these things out and they get put into production, bugs are found, they get battle hardened and battle tested. This means that you can reuse the same code and know that it's actually really good for production, will be really stable. And this is one that I kind of like was talking to some friends about recently. I've got a few friends in Japan right now who are looking for a bit of new work. It's actually incredibly valuable for job opportunities. A lot of the time when you talk to recruiters these days, it usually starts with, so I was checking out your GitHub page. So this is really good because it actually shows off straight away what your skill level is, and actually shows that over time you've been getting better, and actually goes to show that you are capable of finishing and releasing something. So this is all great stuff that's really valuable if you want to get a job in the sort of software industry to indicate what your capabilities are. And one of my friends down in Mountain View actually said this to me as well, which I feel was really good. Like, I use a lot of open source libraries in my apps, and like I feel kind of guilty. I'm just taking advantage of other people's work for free. So I always like to think of actually releasing my own libraries as trying to give back. So I'm throwing something into the pool that other people can use while I'm whoops, sorry. Everyone's done that this conference. Back into completely lost my train of thought. So I'm giving back to the pool that I've been taking out of. So it's really good in the fact that everyone has something they can contribute. Everyone has something they love doing, whether it be like graphics or data or networking. The thing is, we can all probably bring something unique to the table. And I really encourage you to do that, just to come in, because everyone can contribute something new that other people might not have actually done before. And a few years ago, a lovely chap called Auta went on a really awesome presentation spree talking about open source by default. The concept was, unless you have a really, really good reason why not to, you should just open source all the stuff you're doing anyway. Obviously, there's caveats to that. Like if it's a commercial product, you probably can't get away with open sourcing that. That would be bad. But things like, at the time, Auta was working at Artsy, and his example was Artsy's value is in the content on the servers. The apps are just those windows into the server. So the apps can be open source, and people can watch the development happen in real time out in the open, because the value is actually on the server itself. So that meant there was no detriment to the company and just all the stuff to gain by making the iOS clients open source. Okay, so that was a quick introduction. So how do you actually go about publishing your own library? So hopefully this is most of this is probably common knowledge, but hopefully there's a few tidbits in here that you might have picked up before. So the first was platform. I think this goes without saying that if there was a repo wars, GitHub totally won. Everything, all the cool kids hang out on GitHub. Apple publishes Swift on GitHub. If you're going to get involved in the industry, in the community, GitHub is where you need to be. I mean, there's other really good ones too. GitLab is really awesome as well, but GitHub is where all the libraries are. Language. All right, here we go. So is there anyone else who likes Objective-C? Show of hands. Anyone? Oh, hey! That's nice. Excellent. Hey, cool. Thank you. So my main thing I like about Objective-C at the moment still is it just works. I can download an iPhone 1 project from 2008 and build it in Xcode 9, and it'll still run, which is fantastic. It's like magic. Another thing is it works with every Swift version. Now I've had a bit of a sad encounter. Someone came onto one of my repos and said, I work at a company that moved to Swift, but we're on Swift 2, but we don't have the resources or the time to move to Swift 3 yet. So we're stuck running in Swift 2. We have to hold the Xcode version back. And we are very grateful that you made your library Objective-C, because that guarantees it'll just keep working in the future. Like, support's not going to drop. So the nice thing about running libraries in Objective-C is it'll work on anything. But again, let's not be in denial here. Objective-C is old, it's a bit clunky, it's a bit retro, and it's a bit more buggy than Swift. So it does take more time to write code in Objective-C. So and eventually, I'm still not sure if it'll go away completely, because most of Apple's code base is still Objective-C. But I get the feel it wouldn't surprise me if one day Apple would just go, okay, new App Store rule, no Objective-C apps. Every app submitted from now has to be Swift. I could totally see that happening in a couple more years. Hopefully not, but we'll see. So Swift is the future. Swift is where we're heading. So this is really good. It's fantastic, and the amount of support behind Swift from Apple and the community has been fantastic. It's new. It's really fast to write compared to Objective-C. I like it. Brad Larson, the person who wrote GPU Image, redid the entire library in Swift, and he said that for the exact same amount of functionality, he had to write literally half the amount of Swift it took as compared to the Objective-C version. So Swift is amazing because you can actually get more code out, more apps out quicker because the sheer amount of code you have to write is significantly less. There are still some little, teething issues though. There's source incompatible issues. The sad state of the fact is a lot of the sample code on apple.com just won't compile in Xcode 9 without doing a migration. Well, I think we're past that now. We're at the point where we're starting to like stabilize and solidify, so this is going to be a problem that's going to go away very soon. There's no ABI compatibility, which is still a bit of an issue. If you want to compile a framework for Swift, you have to do it for every version of Swift you want to support. At the moment, Realm ships 5 separate binaries to support Swift 3.0 through to 4. But again, like Apple have realized this is a huge teething problem, so they're working on it, and hopefully Swift 5 will have it. And like I say, it's still quite immature. Like, I don't think anyone could call themselves an expert at Swift just yet. Maybe Chris Latner can. But it's like this. Everyone's still working on what best patterns are, and like what the best way of doing things is. So it's still like in a whole mouth churn, but it's going to solidify them very, very soon. So if you are going to go publish your own library, here are a few things you probably should put in there. The first one is putting the code in there is usually a good start. A lot of people don't do this, and you'd think this would be like a given, but you should always put an example app in there you can download and run straight away, so you can see how the library works with very little effort. Some libraries, like some people, like if it's very small, like maybe they'll like release just one class or something, you should probably still put an example app in there because if you want to actually test out how the class works, you still need to have some kind of executable. Screenshots are also a thing you'd assume most things would have. Sometimes it doesn't really apply, like Realm doesn't have screenshots because how do you take a screenshot of a database? But for the most part, having a screenshot of what the library looks like is really, really useful. ReadMe file is also a good thing to have, like explaining what the library does, like installation steps, things like that. And this is kind of, you wouldn't think this is required, but like things like CocoaPods demand this. You have to have a license file to indicate what license you're releasing your code under. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more. Okay, so here's a great way to start a developer holy war. So we've got 2 main dependency managers. We've got CocoaPods and we've got Carthage. A quick show of hands, who likes CocoaPods? Well, that's most of the room, nice. Who likes Carthage? That's actually still a good, okay, wow, that's impressive. It's nearly half and half. Okay, cool. So I like CocoaPods, by the way, even though most of the CocoaPods developers call me Tom. But yeah, basically, if you want to actually make sure that your library is accessible to many people, you should definitely make sure you support both. CocoaPods is very straightforward. It's just a matter of creating what's called a pod spec file. You just dump that into the repo, and then perform a little action in the pod command line utility to push it up. I think Carthage is even simpler because it's basically like you just got to make sure your library compiles as a dynamic framework, and that's it. And for the most part, supporting both is not that much trouble, and you should definitely support both to reach the biggest audience. ReadMe. So I always and ah about what I should put in a ReadMe, but I've started to come up with a standardized kind of template that I always go with when I release new libraries. First one is a title, a quick subtitle talking about basically what it does in one sentence, and then like a bit more of a blurb underneath saying what it does in more detail. Screenshot is always good. If you have the time and energy to make a video, I did it for this one, you can do that as well. Especially if it's a really animation-driven library, a video is very valuable. Quick feature list to say like all the things that you've kind of like added that might not be obvious, but you might want to just go in there and say it's there if you want to use it. Like for example, I spent a lot of time making sure that library worked with the split screen feature of iPad. So if you actually make it split screen, they'll all shrink, which took a lot of like creative thinking because it was like asset regeneration on the fly and stuff like that. But yeah, it's like that's stuff that is nice to have, but you should probably highlight it because it's not obvious. System requirements, obviously you have to make sure like whatever iOS level you support, or whatever platform, it's very clear. Installation instructions, usually manual installation, CocoaPods installation, Carthage installation. Some sample code, just some like really bare bones hello world just to show how you actually get started straight away. Other more advanced libraries, I think Alamo Fire actually has like a wiki as well, so if you want to write a huge document about it, you can. There's a wiki feature in GitHub. Contributing information, if people want to file pull requests or file issues, usually like a nice little guideline on what you want would be nice. And finally, what license you're releasing your code under. So on that note, licensing. So I'm not a lawyer, so please don't take what I'm saying as actual truth, but I'm trying my best here. I've had run-ins with copyright lawyers before, so I probably know a little bit more than I should. So copyright itself is automatic. If you don't release under a license, you're actually not just letting people have it. You're actually saying like, no, you can't use my code because I haven't actually given you permission yet. I have to give you explicit permission to use my code because copyright is automatic and automatically applies. So when you actually add a license, you're using like a standard template that dictates what your permission, what other people may do with your code. And that may include things like commercial use, non-commercial use, whether they have to re-release the code, things like that. Don't use GPL. GPL is you can see the huge flame wars on like Hacker News and Reddit, but for the most part, GPL is incompatible with the App Store, even if you do all the other like requirements. Apparently that still isn't enough, so you are still in violation by uploading your code to the App Store. So just don't use it, it's just a mess. And one person called it a cancer, and I might kind of agree with that. Apache is really good when there's software patents involved, so usually larger companies will use Apache just for that like extra patent coverage. But for the most part, if you're a small indie developer and you're just releasing like libraries, MIT I think is the best. Like you can't go wrong with MIT. Cool. Changelog. This is something I never do. I'm trying to get into the habit. It's always very valuable to have another document in there saying like what changed. So when users say like I reported a bug, was the bug fixed? You can say yep, the bug was fixed. Here's the changelog entry. So this is really good because it actually lets you see like the development of the products and actually see what you've changed. You can refer users to it. So also, if you want to change an API and you know you're going to upset some people by doing that, you can put it in here so people will obviously have a place they can refer to. Like I said, it highlights bugs. And the greatest thing is there is actually, like the main reason I didn't do it is I didn't know what the best template was. But I think there's actually a website now, keepachangelog.com, where you can just download a blank one and get started. So that's really, really good. Releases. Obviously, when you actually want to do when you put out new versions of your library, you need to actually, like for CocoaPods and the likes, you need to actually have a discrete release. So like this commit is what this version is. So you do that via tags, and GitHub is great because when you set a tag, like that appears in the releases tab as well. This also lets you pre-compile binaries and just attach them to the releases entry. So you can, like again, with Swift, you have to do a lot of recompiling if you want to support every version of Swift. But you can just upload them there. You can, like usually the best thing to do is just put the changelog entries in the release, so it's very concise. You don't have to go navigating a text file. You can just go straight there and look at it. And oh, that was it. Okay, I thought there was one more. Cool. And yeah, that's keep a changelog. Finally, continuous integration. So, like as we will establish, testing is very important. We need testing. The problem is, like obviously, setting up a test harness is very, very hard and maybe time-consuming, so people might not want to do that. The great thing is there's this really sweet service called Travis. Does anyone who knows about Travis here? Cool. That's about 20 people. Excellent. Travis is really nice because basically it integrates with GitHub, and every time you do an update, do a commit, or if you or someone else does a pull request, like Travis can run your tests against it, and then say like, yes, this is good, it's mergeable, or no, something failed. The really sweet thing is if it's an open source project, so it's not a private repo on GitHub, it's completely free. So you've really got no excuse not to have a Travis instance running on your library. It's very, like I said, it's got full integration into GitHub, and it's very easy to set up. All you have to do is put in a YAML file in your repo, and then go to travis-ci.org and set it up. And then after that, it's just completely automatic. Cool. In the last section, basically once you've like published the library, what do you have to do? Like, you can't just walk away. Basically, what do you have to do after the fact once the library's out there? The first one is you've got to be somewhat vigilant about when the platform gets updated. So iOS 11 landed, and the iPhone 10 also landed. So now we must love the notch, embrace the notch. Sorry, not the notch, the sensor housing. Sorry. A lot of stuff in my library's broke. Like, basically every assumption I made about UI scroll view changed in iOS 11 because everything changed to accommodate UI, the safe area inset API. And suddenly every assumption I made just broke. So I actually go through and like run everything in iPhone 10 on the simulator and make sure it all worked again. So yeah, lots of stuff can break. You might not even realize it. Like I would never have guessed like UI scroll view would change in such a way that stuff would just start breaking. But yeah, basically when a new beta comes out, it's a good idea just to test it. Obviously, the great record is working at Realm. Usually, like the second a new version of Xcode comes out, within seconds, there's usually like an issue on the Realm GitHub saying like, where's support for Xcode 9 beta 3? So, like, if you can be as proactive as you can in like updating these things, because the more popular your library is, the more users will expect like day one out of the gate support for the new platforms. If you can, test the new hardware. I'm saving up for a second mortgage to afford a new iPhone 10 so I can do this, but or just I'll sell my working kidney. I don't know, one of the two. But yeah, if you can get the hardware, that's the best way to test. Because I don't really think this. I haven't really seen any cases in UI, at least on the simulator, where the behavior was that different to the device. But obviously, if you're doing things like ARKit and things that would demand a device, then you really need one. Bug reports. Okay. Yeah, but some people like. It's really good. Like you get all sorts of like you get wildly different types of bug reports, but like the best one is like it doesn't work. Please help. It's like what doesn't work and stuff like that. It's like what device were you running it on? What iOS version of that? So GitHub tries to mitigate this by having like a template that like pre-fills the comment box to try and make it a bit easier. But I've also seen people either just delete it and ignore it, or they'll put the issue under the template and leave it in there. But yeah, like you can try. And for the most part, a lot of users are really good about it. But the important thing is, like, if you set a template, you can like tell users what you expect in an issue, so you can actually start reproducing it and trying to fix it. And one thing I've noticed is a lot of the time when people ask issues, English might not be their first language, so they might not be able to explain the problem they're having properly, or they didn't even understand what the issue template was. So, you know, GitHub also encourages community standards. Always make sure that be understanding and be aware that they might not be trying to be like terse or angry, coming off as angry. It might just be like how they write English. Another thing is feature requests. My favorite one was someone went, "Yeah, your crop is good. Photos are nice, but could it do movies?" And I'm like, "Movies? That's a huge. Okay, I'll think about that. I'll get back to you." Yeah. So feature requests can come. Sometimes they'll be ridiculous, but I'll refer to another talk about this in a second, but it's okay to refuse if it's not feasible. But another great thing is you can actually just say like, "That's a great idea. I don't have time to add that. But if you want, you can do it yourself and make a PR, and I'll review it and let you know." And one thing my friends like to always tell me is you could always just say, "I'll do it for money." So that always works too. Yeah. Pull requests. Pull requests are awesome. People will like your library enough to actually download it, make changes, and actually submit. The most valuable thing is submit the changes back to you. So you're making your thing better. That being said, depending on I know a lot of big companies always require the person to sign like a license agreement. So they're like kind of like rescinding their IP rights to that pull request. So the company now owns that code. So yeah, sometimes it might be required, and sometimes that's okay. But for small projects, it probably isn't necessary. Sometimes people will file pull requests and they're not great. Like sometimes, I had one pull request once where the person added a new feature, but they didn't test that the feature worked in landscape mode. So I just ran it, like rotated my iPad, and everything exploded. I'm like, whoa, what? So sometimes you got to make sure the quality could be very different. So it's always a good thing to have tests in place. They can do an initial pass, but then also really scrutinize it just to make sure that you can the library better than they do. So there's always things that you can check that they might have considered. Another thing I like is you should always. I always encourage people to just propose the idea before they start doing work on it. So I can say, yeah, it's a great idea, or no, I'm already doing that, or basically just to make sure they're not going to waste their time and they're not going to get upset because they did a whole pile of work and I'm like, I can't accept this because it's not the right thing, or it's not going to work with my current stuff. So back in Tokyo this year, so I'm not that great at talking about supporting open source communities, but there's a lovely chap called Felix who made this very, very small product called Fastlane. It's not small. And actually one of his coworkers is in the crowd here. And he did a really fantastic talk in Tokyo this year about how Fastlane actually goes about supporting, doing support requests and handling the support. And it's really fascinating. He goes all out. There's bots involved and everything. And he just talks about how he actually goes about doing it. I really recommend you look at this talk because there's a lot. You can make a whole talk about just supporting GitHub repos, and that's a really fantastic talk to watch. Anyway, that's my talk. Thank you so much for watching. Now, please go and make something awesome and let me know about it.
Okay, thank you, team. Any questions?
There's my email, by the way. That's my Twitter.
Please proceed to the mic. It's too far for me to run over.
Yeah, it's working.
Cool.
So thanks for the talk.
Thank you.
I'm Andres. So I was using 2 weeks ago the automatic tool from CocoaPods to start a project.
The what from CocoaPods, sorry?
The automatic tool. they have an automatic tool, command line tool.
Oh, the command line tool.
So
Yeah,
they
yep.
create the workspace and the pod
Yep.
file for you and everything. And I was trying to add some tests, and then I realized that they add tests in the example project, but they don't add target for testing for the pod. So I found myself having the test inside the example project and not in the main folder. Do you know something about that?
Actually, I always just put the tests in the example app. That's usually the easiest way.
And why is that
Yeah.
and not in a target outside of the example project?
The that's out. I think there's like several people from CocoaPods here who might be able to answer this, but yeah, I think it just depends, I guess. But I've never actually had a problem because I put the target tests in the example app. Like, I guess you could separate them, but I guess if you want to just consolidate them out files, yeah, maybe come talk to me about this afterwards. Have a think about that one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You, anyone?
Hi.
Hi, Nick.
I noticed you had a code of conduct file in one of the screenshots in your repository.
That's correct, yes.
You didn't mention that at all, but sort of how does code of conduct work for a repository, like for a library? It's not like a conference, right?
Sorry, that's right. I said community standards, but I actually didn't mean code of conduct. So that's a new initiative that GitHub's actually spearheading. Like when you create a project now, you can say like you can create a code of conduct, and it's basically saying that when you participate in this repo, this is the kind of behavior we expect you to act like. Don't discriminate, don't be offensive or anything. At the same time, there's also a pledge that the people who are supporting the project will treat you the same way. So it's kind of like an initiative from GitHub. I put it in there just to make sure like the whole thing was like checked out. But what's the question again?
That was kind of it. But like, have you ever had to like deal with any conduct issues in it?
I haven't personally, but I've definitely seen other poor repos. Like there was a really bad one a long time ago where they got really angry and started like flaming the developers because they wouldn't add a completely outrageous feature. So it definitely happens on GitHub, and certainly for the more popular projects, I'm assuming like there's a lot of really passionate people who might get a bit heated about some of the progress of the library. So it's a nice thing to have, just so you can refer to say like, sorry, but you're in violation of the code of conduct and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? We can have one last question. Okay, if not, I'll ask the last question. So
Okay.
let's say for me, right, if I want to start in the open source, do you recommend me to start submitting a pull request, or do I start a new repo?
So a
do
new
you-
repo?
do you
I guess it depends. So if a good thing is like you can. I'd probably say start off with a pull request. Like if you have a project you really like, one I really liked was IG List Kit by Instagram. So like that one's really good in the fact they actually have in their issues. They say like this is a feature this is a feature that we would like to have, but we don't have time to add it. There's like various levels of difficulty. So I submitted one a while ago. It was a really trivial one. It was just like fix a typo. And so I submitted that one. I was actually fascinated to see how this actually works with the process. And I got an automated bot saying, sign the license agreement. And then the thing got merged. And I got a message saying, thanks for contributing to Facebook, Tom. I'm guessing that was Jesse or someone. But yeah, that's really good because you actually get the experience of like learning how it works. And you can take what you learn and then apply that to your own repos.
Okay, thank you.
Cool, thanks, farewell.
Okay, thank you, team. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thanks.